Welcome back. All right, so I'm wearing my Vancouver Grizzlies jersey, but since it's a tank top and it's smaller, I'm wearing a T-shirt underneath it, which feels weird. No, it looks weird. It feels weird because it's weird, but nobody needs to see my shoulders. So coming up with a misery index for the NBA, there are some miserable teams in the NBA, aren't there? I was actually kind of surprised by who was number one, and then I went, no, that works. There have been some teams that have been bad for a while. And this is the issue where when you have a team that hasn't won a championship in ever, and they're not in the top half of this board, the NBA has some interesting relationships within it, doesn't it? I even had to adjust this one, or I went, I got to adjust that. That's not right. And we'll get to that when I get there. I'm going to be completely transparent with this. Now, the way this works is the most miseried franchise over the last 10 years, and I only did the last 10 years, from 2010, 2011 until this season. The one with the most misery is here. The one with the least is here. The one with the least misery is the Golden State Warriors. Now, I know if you're a Golden State fan, you might look at this year and say, hey, things are getting miserable. Right. But there were championships to get to miserable, and that is definitely going to have a huge impact on this. The way that I score this, a championship will deduct a lot of points. Now, the misery points will add up pretty quickly if you don't make the playoffs. And some teams just don't make the playoffs. But if you have a championship, it cuts off a whole bunch of points. And Golden State finished actually with negative points when I was done. Number 29, Miami, the Heat. So this is where it gets interesting. There's a little LeBron meter on this. And I thought, I should have a team 31, which is just LeBron. What's LeBron's record? And then the other side of that becomes, so what about a misery index for superstar players? Where you look at all-time greats and you say, okay, which one's had the most playoff success, which one hasn't, right? So misery index of Hall of Famers and that kind of thing, I'm thinking ahead. I'm thinking just in case there's no hockey this winter, and I do that because you have to think, how are you going to generate videos? If I can have a misery index for players, not just teams, I think that'd be fantastic. So LeBron shows up at 29. At 28, San Antonio. I love the Spurs, and people know this about me. And what I love about the Spurs is that it feels like, when they're good, when they're great, when they're winning championships, when they're that the guys they get, whether it's Duncan, whoever it is that's the guy they're building around, they always have this very hard-working team, and it's a team environment. And while you can look at some of what guys like LeBron have done in the past, with San Antonio, it just feels more like it's the team effort when they do it. I know that's not always the case, but it's felt that way to me, that it's not just one guy driving the whole team. Number 27, the Raptors. It's funny, if I do go back to other decades and look at other misery indexes, and how these videos perform will make me decide whether or not it warrants going back and doing previous decades. But the Raptors would have been pretty high up on this board the first decade of their existence. Not as high as the team I'm wearing, which was the Vancouver Grizzlies, but still pretty poor overall record. So for the Raptors, we'll see how the next 10 years goes. But the past 10 years have been pretty good. So winning a championship, being in the mix, definitely helps keep their points down. Number 26, the Thunder, Oklahoma City. Oklahoma City, pretty solid team. Of course, if you live in Seattle, you may still have some issues with the Thunder, and rightfully so. It is too bad they left Seattle. And I always found myself torn. Did I want to see the former Sonics win a championship, or did I not? Because if I was to see a Vancouver team in hockey go somewhere else, would I want to see them win a championship or not? So how would Seattle feel about their basketball team if they won a championship somewhere else? It was a question I was always asking myself. So there's the Thunder at 26. 25, Celtics. Boston's pretty consistently good over the last decade. Not necessarily championship form all the time, but pretty consistently good. And so therefore, they don't add up as many points as a lot of the other teams on the board. And I think this is definitely a league of haves and have-nots. Number 24, and a lot of 24's good times are at the beginning of the decade, and that's the Mavericks. So the Mavericks have fallen on hard times recently, But the Mavs, another team that I did find myself rooting for. So teams from Texas, found myself rooting for them in everything but football. Actually, it's just the Cowboys because the Houston Texans, I don't mind them either. So it's just the Cowboys. I apologize to Cowboys fans everywhere. So yeah, the Mavericks, 24 for them, and very successful organization, very successful owner in Mark Cuban. Number 23, Cleveland. Now, what's interesting with Cleveland is that they racked up some points while LeBron's in Miami. LeBron comes back to Cleveland. They win. LeBron leaves, and things fall apart again. But because of the fact that they won, that bumped them up ahead of these other teams. But if you're a Cleveland fan, you feel like it was kind of empty because then he left again. I would totally understand that. I would totally get that. And yet there's LeBron. And at 22, the team that LeBron currently plays for. Now, the Lakers were higher up on this on pure points. And I thought about it, and I thought, no. The Lakers winning a championship this year takes so much misery out of that Lakers organization. And considering they were playing for Kobe Bryant after he passed, there's not going to be a lot of misery over the last decade. And you look at some of the bad years. And so I pulled them down. And one of the reasons I did that is because I could not have them less miserable than the Clippers. Now, here's what's interesting. The LA Clippers have never got past round 2. I'm aware of this. And I even added on points because they don't have a championship in their history. But they've been good for the last decade. They just can't get over the hump. So if you're a Clippers fan and you're saying, why aren't we at the top? It's because I'm not measuring the entirety of their existence. If this was an entirety of their existence, the Clippers would be much higher. I just don't have that kind of time. It takes me over an hour to make up this list and figure out all the points. And that's if I'm uninterrupted. And I have to be uninterrupted because it's a lot of data I'm going over and over and over. And the Clippers for the last decade is 21st. Yes, if you're a Clippers fan and you're saying we feel like we're the most miserable, absolutely. But for the last decade, they've done well. They can't get over the hump. And it has to happen soon, right? Number 20, Portland. I like Portland. I know when I was watching Last Dance and they were showing Portland against Chicago, I was like, I remember that. I wanted Clyde the Glide to win that. He didn't. I really wanted Clyde the Glide to win that. I wanted Portland to win. And it didn't happen. But Portland, I've kept an eye on since then. It'd be nice to see them win something, wouldn't it? It would. It'd be nice to see Portland. Don't be that way. Don't be that way. It would be nice too. Number 19, Houston. Houston Rockets, and now there's some debate about whether or not James Harden might end up somewhere else. I saw that the other day, and I thought, okay, James Harden in any other jersey won't look great. The Rockets, and similar to San Antonio, they felt like they were a team, and I thought their role and their being a pretty solid team was kind of glossed over in Last Dance, where they were talking a lot about the Pistons, and I know it's not like the Bulls locked horns with the Rockets a lot, but I thought, the Rockets could be acknowledged. I think you could do a good documentary on some of the Spurs teams and some of the Rockets teams as well. The Rockets, pretty well-run organization for a long time. Number 18, the Pacers. Pacers, another one of those teams, just trying to get over the top. And again, I was watching Last Dance. I was like, right, when Larry Bird was there, I remember that. And that was the whole Indiana boy comes home and he's going to lead him to a championship idea. And then it just didn't work. Pacers are in this. Pacers are a pretty good team. But where it gets interesting for me is that we talk a lot about sports that have true parity. And it feels to me with basketball that one player makes a bigger difference in basketball than any other sport. And some teams just don't have that one player to get them over the top. And some of the teams we're going to see higher up on the board lack that one player. And to me, some of the ones in this area, they just need that one guy. And, LeBron and Michael Jordan, two of the best ever, right? Wilt Chamberlain as well. Those guys don't grow on trees. And so it's not like you can just go out and trade for one. You kind of got to get into a bidding war. And in the case of LeBron, he's going to want to bring guys with him, and he's going to want a lot of say in what happens with the team, and rightfully so. They win championships, or at least get to championships. Number 17, Milwaukee, the Bucks. So the Bucks, less miserable than the Pacers, Rockets, Portland. But again, if you're a Bucks fan, you're going, I don't feel like I've been that happy necessarily. I understand. This is a league where, I was surprised at how many teams are consistently mediocre or bad. The Bucks have been good. And so because the Bucks have been good for, large part of the last decade, they end up 17th. 16th, the Hawks. Atlanta's one of those teams too that, they got to win eventually. And this is the thing. You've got the Braves, you've got the Hawks, and you've got the Falcons. And at some point, one of them has to win something, right? The Braves are snake bit. The Falcons, of course, got to a Super Bowl, and now they don't look anywhere close to it. And you've got the Hawks. At some point, some Atlanta team has to get there. And I've talked about a misery index by city. That's coming as well. And I don't know what Atlanta's rating is going to be, but it could be high. And they like to have teams named after birds. Thrashers, Hawks, Falcons. They like birds. Atlanta definitely likes birds. So yeah, Atlanta, the top team in the third row, and now we're into the top half. The top half starts with the Bulls. So I've talked a lot about Last Dance, and since Michael Jordan left, they've won a grand total of 0 championships. And, it's funny because when you watch that documentary and you realize while you're watching this, that they end out their dynasty and they're not going to win again. And it was a situation where the team was talking about going to a rebuild. We're going to go into a rebuild. We're going to get new players, young players, and it's going to all work out. It's going to be great. And watching this now, you're like, it's not, though. It's not going to be great. And if you haven't watched The Last Dance, I highly recommend it. Fantastic. Even if you're not a basketball fan, I think you'd enjoy it. So the Bulls are the top half, and I don't know how much patience there's going to be in Chicago for how much longer to get back into contention. 14, the Grizzlies. Yep, Grizzlies have to be in the top half. They've had a couple of good teams the last decade. They got close at one point there, but I kept thinking, they're the Grizzlies, though. And I remember watching that run, and I kept in the back of my mind thinking, but they're the Grizzlies. They're not going to win. And then sure enough, they didn't. So eventually, even if they change the logo, make it all new and fancy, they're still the Grizzlies. I'm surprised they've never changed the name of the team, to be honest. Number 13, the 76ers. So Philadelphia, a team as well that when I get into misery indexes of cities, if not for the Eagles, yeah, it's been a rough go. You've got the Phillies, you've got the 76ers, you've got the Flyers. Yep. So the 76ers are 13th on this list. We'll see over the next decade if things get better for them. I have a feeling that this could be a team that we look back at if I go back 3 decades, and it could actually be that they're higher on the list than that. They had one season this last decade where they had 70 losses. That's insane. Number 12, the Wizards. The smartest thing that the Wizards ever did was change the name from Bullets. I never liked the name Washington Bullets. Their jerseys and their logo are kind of lame too. I like Wizards much better, but their wizardry is lacking. And for a team named Wizards, they don't do that well. They were the team that, of course, got Michael Jordan after he left the Bulls, and it just never quite really clicked. And I remember waiting for it. I remember thinking, all right, well, with Jordan they're going to do it, and then they just didn't. Showing that when you look at that Bulls team, there were more guys on that team than Jordan. You needed Pippen, you needed Rodman, you needed all these guys. It wasn't just MJ on his own. Number 11, the New Orleans Pelicans, which is not a great name. Now, of course, it's a better name than the one they had before that because it wasn't their name. But Pelicans, I'm not sold on that. Is there something? I mean, a lot of sports have teams named after birds. I've always thought that was strange. I guess I can kind of get it with basketball with the slam dunks and everything. I guess the flight aspect of basketball being as it is, but I mean you see it in every sport. So, but Pelicans there's nothing really threatening about a pelican. It's just not really a threatening name. That being said, one team name that makes my wife giggle every time I say it is the Nuggets. And I'm not sure why Denver Nuggets makes her laugh and snicker, but they're number 10 on the misery index. We'll see if the next 10 years finds them in a better spot. They did show some flashes of that in the postseason this year, of course, and they have that never say die attitude, so the Nuggets may very well find themselves moving down in future years. But for right now, yeah, they're number 10. And definitely some lean years for them along the way. Number 9, the Utah Jazz. Yeah, Utah. A once proud franchise, never quite got over the top, and now one of the top 10 teams in the misery index. It's so bizarre, to me anyways, just because I used to watch basketball all the time. So when I see some of these teams like the Jazz, and the team that's number 1 surprised me. I have to be honest, the team that's number 1 surprised me. But yeah, Utah, because I figured it was going to be the Knicks. But it's like, oh, the Knicks have to win. Knicks aren't winning this? Weird. But yeah, Utah finds themselves at number 9. Number 8, the Nets. And I've got this one. I've got the other logo for the team as well, the New Jersey Nets one of that. Now I'll go with the Brooklyn one because Brooklyn. But yeah, the Nets, hit and miss with the Nets. But that seems to be the case for most of their existence. The Nets were never a team that I looked at and said, oh, that's a team that I feel is a threat for a title. And I still haven't had any year where I've thought, oh, the Nets are going to win it. But yeah, nothing but net for the Nets, unless you're talking about championships, in which case it's an airball. Number 7, the Orlando Magic. One of my favorite names in basketball. When they named it the Magic, I thought, all right, so you've got, the Magical Kingdom and Disney World and all that, which makes sense to call it the Magic. But it hasn't been fantastic over the last 10 years, and so the Magic find themselves in the top row on the misery index. And yeah, I mean, these ones kind of explain themselves. There's not really a whole lot. Like, number 6 is the Knicks. Now, I thought the Knicks would be number 1 too. I really did. I was really surprised that there were 5 teams that accumulated more points than the Knicks on the misery index for the last 10 years. If this was the last 20, I'm going to say the Knicks would be higher up. But the Knicks end up in 6th spot on the current misery index. I'm surprised. Number 5, the Pistons. You want to talk about teams that have had good runs and proud histories? Yeah, Pistons. Proud for Pistons, but most of us who didn't cheer for the Pistons knew them as kind of being jerks in the 80s. But they were jerks that won. And that's the important distinction. If you have a team that's made up of guys that the rest of the league doesn't like and most other fan bases don't like, but you win, there's a certain amount of respect that'll come with that. If you don't win, then you're just jerks. So they were champs, and now the Pistons kind of, spinning their wheels over the last decade. Number 4, Sacramento Kings. No playoffs for the Kings in a while. Yeah, their score was pretty consistent throughout. I was like, okay, so I'll add these points for the Kings. Yep, and I'll add them again. Yep, all right. And the only reason that they don't end up finishing first is because their seasons weren't quite as bad as some of the other teams that finished ahead of them on this board. And the Kings, that's the kind of team that I, as a fan of underdogs, will look at and go, I will cheer for Sacramento. And then the logical part of my brain kicks in and goes, we're doing what now? No. You already cheer for the Chargers. You already cheer for the Bengals. You already cheer for the Canucks. You cheer for enough teams that never win anything. Don't you dare. And you cheer for the Padres. Don't you dare cheer for the Sacramento Kings. Then my brain gets told to be quiet because I can cheer for whoever I want to. They're never going to win. Number 3, the T-Wolves. I remember when the Timberwolves came into the league, and I thought, that's a great name for a team. Minnesota Timberwolves, that's great. And then, of course, you have the Minnesota Timberwolves, you have the Minnesota Wild. There's some definite similarities between the two teams. I know they've changed their logo. I don't have the sticker of the new logo. But, yeah, the T-Wolves. They draft first this coming week. So let's hope they can turn things around, because the T-Wolves really desperately need to have a good run. They did make the playoffs in the last decade, but not consistently. And they've had some really bad seasons along the way. Number 2, Charlotte. I feel bad about Charlotte. I remember when they went back and they were the Bobcats. And Bobcats, other than being a really generic name, because it's very generic, and then they went back to Hornets because that's what the city's name should be for their team. It's just it's been just kind of miserable, and so I'm hoping, fingers crossed that things get better for the Hornets, because it has to, right? So all of this considered, the number one team on this list kind of surprised me. Because again, it's a team I want to see them succeed. I want to see something good happen. That's the Phoenix Suns. I want to see something good happen for the Suns. For a team that's been pretty downtrodden for a long time. And when we get into misery indexes of cities and of that region, I'm going to say that between the Coyotes and the Suns, there hasn't been a whole lot to cheer about over the last decade. If you're a sports fan. Now, thankfully, there's the Cardinals down there as well, and the Arizona Cardinals have definitely been better than the other two, but I was very surprised at the end of this that the Suns ended up getting the most points. But there's been some brutal years over the last decade, and definitely the have-nots in basketball. The separation, it feels like, in basketball between the haves and have-nots is huge. And whether that's real or imagined, it just feels like there are some really, really good teams that are going to contend for a long time, and that there are some bad teams that you don't know if they're ever going to get out of it. Will Sacramento ever be a genuinely good team? I don't know. Will the Knicks ever get this right? I don't know. We know the Knicks are willing to spend the money. It's where do they spend it? Who do they spend it on? This is a problem. And the Suns end up winning on the misery index in the NBA. And this is from 2010-2011 until the season that finished 2019-2020 with the Lakers, these guys right here, as your NBA world champions. It's an interesting list. It really is. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. And hey, thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.